All right, you're live.
Okay, welcome everybody to the meeting of the Cleveland Community Police Commission's Police Policy Committee. It's Wednesday, January 17th, 6 p.m., 6:03 p.m. And we're getting going here. So calling the meeting to order, Commissioner Benito.
Present.
Commissioner Early.
Present.
Commissioner Garrett Ferguson. Not here. I'm here. Commissioner Wong.
Present.
Okay. So yeah, we just we have some work group work that's been, we can do some updates on, and then we'll get into some new business with the GPOs. Are there any agenda revisions that anybody would like to make?
I have a question about agenda item update. Sorry, I have a question about the proposed language to determine which division notice under CPC authority. I do see that you've written authority here. Is it for approval or authority? Is it like an approval, like a pre-approval that we're looking at?
If you want to take something or add something to the agenda, I mean, it's.
I just want to clarify what that means, because there's two
So look at
words.
which ones fall under our authority.
Well, I just want to know that I don't believe you can do that it has to be under the city charter. You
So
cannot
this is a discussion item, then we can talk about that when we get to it, unless you want to change.
There's two
something.
words here. There's CPC's authority and CPC approval, which I interpret to be two different things.
Okay, what's your proposal?
That I'm fine with approval, and if that's this, do you understand my point?
I do not at all understand your point. No.
We cannot make a motion to limit the authority that is guaranteed to us by the charter.
There is no motion on the table tonight. This is discussion. This is for us to discuss. And eventually we will bring it to the full commission as part of the process.
So I think we should get the language right.
Let us talk about that when we get to that.
Okay.
Do you have any, you had expressed some concerns about accountability committee update. Is there anything you want to do with that?
I don't understand. I already had a discussion with Jason yesterday. This performance evaluation GPOs, there was no discussion with accountability as to why it is being put in policy. We have work groups that deal with employment issues and HR issues. You do not have those work groups. This is not a GPO. It was a manual. So I think that it shouldn't even be considered in this committee until accountability has had any say in it. I mean, this is now you're creating a work group without talking to the committee that's normally tasked with this behavior and taking work out of it.
It's
at the bottom.
So I would suggest, since there are members of the accountability committee here, we can discuss that when we get to it and figure out what's the best procedure.
All right, I wish, but this
agenda was sent out a week ago, so
I understand that,
to respond to it.
but you could have also talked to me about it.
The agenda was sent a week ago. We had plenty of opportunity to respond. So let's get into the work group. The emerging police surveillance technology work group. The main issue here, and I'm hoping we can have a vote on that, is the ShotSpotter GPO that was sent out a while ago. There's the original is here, but I don't know. We have that. I mean, it's been sent out. I forget when I sent it out, like a week ago, or to the committee. So basically, that document, and I also shared that with Commander Carney. The document that we have sent out has three sections. It's the current language, the draft revisions for consideration by the policy committee, and eventually to the full commission. And then just some background initial comments from the work group members who are focused on that. So, so these are the changes you can see in that, the track changes. And this was, basically came out of that work group. So I don't know if there are any questions or if we need to read through anything. We certainly could read through it if we want to, if you folks know that's important, or we could just start with if anybody has any questions. Commissioner Early.
Yes, if we could, because I've read this and I do support it, but I want to, if we can have one of the commanders come up and talk about what that process would look like for the community's sake, because they may not have this document. So if spot shooter is activated, what are the protocols and responses from the police department that will happen? Not to criticize that process because I've read it, but just so that the community knows, and then we can ask a few questions if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
That would be wonderful. That's why I'm glad we're here. So
I do have one question. I do want to note that the surveillance tech group, we only edited one portion of this GPO. Is that true?
no,
We didn't do all of this in the beginning. We never did all of this.
oh no, we just you're right. You're correct. It's like it was the review. The team that reviewed it and reported to us focused in on that particular section of the part that needed revision.
I didn't realize that, so I guess I didn't remember the entire, what was the reason we're not reviewing the entire GPO, but just the portion about, and I was there for that, but I think we should have the entire work group review the entire GPO. We only went through section E, which took section E.
To the chair, that's partially correct. What we did was we assigned a sub-work group of 4 people who reviewed the entire thing, and they came back with their concerns, which focused on that E section. And so you're part of that, and you have been there, Commissioner. So during the 2 or 3 meetings where this was discussed, anyone could have raised any issue about any of these previous points. Many hours were spent on this entire document, but the main focal points was on the specific response portion, with comparison of 2 things. One, 4th Amendment search and seizure law, constitutionally related approach. And the other thing is making sure that this GPO comports with the search and seizure GPO that is already in place for field investigations and stops. And so that's what the analysis focused on. But to sum it up, all of this GPO was considered and multiple hours were spent.
Yeah, that's
the
my
entire
recollection
document.
as well. So I'm a little bit surprised because you were in
I'm
those
not,
meetings.
I don't have that same recollection. I remember that it was assigned to Commissioner former Commissioner Katz and Jonathan Whitmer Rich. And then we basically, I don't think I missed a meeting
No,
for
you
the
did not.
surveillance tech. And then we focus on this. And since I read this a long time ago, I didn't realize that we were going to but again, I'm sure there's probably not that much in the other parts, but we talked about in our discipline work group the importance of words and consistency. So was there a reason why, did anybody look at the other portions?
Yeah.
Yes, in
Because-
fact, they did.
Yes.
As the director said.
I
Yeah,
don't,
all
same
did.
subgroup,
At the very
and we all
first
looked
work
at it.
group, we read it paragraph by paragraph. And when we got to section E, it was decided to send that out
you
to,
weren't, I don't think you were in
yeah,
that.
we went through.
That's
every-
not what I remember,
So I suggest that since we have the commander here tonight and his team, that we
I
can
don't
circle
remember
back to that work group and for clarity, but this is my recollection.
You weren't
we can-
present, I don't think, at every meeting, and
Okay,
I'm
please don't
sure
interrupt
that.
me.
but I'm
This is my
sure-
recollection, and we can follow up and find out, okay? So
We don't have a record of those meetings because they weren't public, but we never
They were
talked about
public meetings, in fact.
they were public, but they were not recorded, and we did not go over these sections.
As I'm saying, my recommendation would be check with the people who did the actual examination of that and came to us and see, just to clarify and make sure we've got it right. So Commander Carney, I think the request to you is just some comment on like the shots fired GPO and the process and stuff.
I have a copy, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Commander Brian Carney with the Cleveland Division of Police, Bureau of Compliance. I just received the CPC comments yesterday for the ShotSpotter GPO. So unfortunately, I have not had the opportunity to review the comments. However, I did send the policy to Commander Slot. He wasn't able to join us this evening. So he will review the recommendations and the feedback from the CPC. And I'm hoping the next policy meeting that he could join us and provide you all with some feedback. This was Commander Kutz he retired. This was his project initially, and then since his retirement, Commander Slot is now in charge of this project. So I don't have any further information at this time.
Commander Carney, in terms of spot shotter, can you tell us what in the community what that process looks like when a shot goes off, how officers respond in this GPO?
Commissioner, I would love to speak as if I'm a subject matter expert, but I'm not in this particular topic. So I don't want to misinform the community. I apologize. This is not my area of expertise. I would defer to Commander Slot.
There were some questions from a community member who was at the surveillance tech work group yesterday, and perhaps just to share those with you so that you're familiar with them and we can figure out how that fits in. It's sort of relevant to your question. I think I sent that to the committee. This is going to take me 1 second. Here it is.
Yeah, Commissioner, if you want to send me those questions, any questions you have from the community or yourselves, please send them.
Yeah, Jason, perhaps you can, if you can explain a little bit, but we have to send them to you too. But if you want to just summarize.
The GPO, I mean,
No, the Shauna Jackson's questions, if you had a chance to.
I spoke to her for an hour, so I'm happy to.
Hold on one second. Did you have anything?
well, so what I know is that the questions were related to notifications of residents about ShotSpotter, right? And then there was a particular ordinance she was asking about, and it was the one that's cited in the GPO that officers are to use when charging, it's or entering. It was like 6.2 something. But her question was about it had to do with discharge of a firearm in a restricted area, and we didn't have the definition of and I didn't have that ordinance in front of me. I think it's a city ordinance, so I don't know why they're saying in a restricted area, what the difference is in the Cleveland ordinance versus the state ordinance. So I'd have to look, but I didn't make any assumptions. But her questions were around that, and then the other concern was, does the city post signage that ShotSpotter is being used in neighborhoods? So if you enter the neighborhood, are you aware that ShotSpotter surveillance is active in that neighborhood? I haven't seen that signage, so but that was their questions. I don't know what other cities do with signage related to ShotSpotter, but from what I recall, where they place the sensors is not public information that's disclosed easily. I'm not saying a person couldn't get that if they tried to pursue it legally, but it's my understanding the division has never publicized where exactly the listening stations are located down to the address level.
Yeah, Commissioner, if you could summarize your conversation with that community member.
So Sienna, I think she's worried that Shauna is worried because she lives in a neighborhood that does have a lot of these shootings, and her hope is that maybe having a sign may deter people. I can see that, but I can also see the alternative. But it does get to a deeper issue about what the community is allowed to know if they're possibly being surveilled. I don't know if you've known about other cases with ShotSpotter that it even picked up background, like a recording of someone, and it was used against him. He was unfortunately falsely imprisoned for a year, in which he almost committed suicide. That might be an extreme case, but I think there are, especially with communities that struggle with a lot of shootings, they also may have just resistance, I think, from previous experience with officers being responsive. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that, so the mics are stationary, they're not moved in any way?
Again, I apologize. I'm not the subject matter expert in this policy. I do not know the functionality of the system itself, how it works. From what I've read in the policy, as you all have, I've not been trained on its functionality. So I can answer any questions as it relates to ShotSpotter.
It's not, I'm really not really asking about the functionality, but about if, because we have traffic cameras and remember there was maybe a constitutional issue and they started alerting people as to speed cameras. My understanding is that the mics don't move, but that even the exact locations are not even known to the city of Cleveland because the company is considering it proprietary information. So that has, I think maybe in previous meetings been said that the city doesn't know the locations and just the overall coverage areas. But I think if we can so I'm not asking like a mechanical functional issue with ShotSpotter, who can give us this information or verify? I just, this is just called from just my own research. The city doesn't even know. But I guess after a while, once the ShotSpotter works, hopefully you will know. But who can answer these kind of pragmatic questions about ShotSpotter as it's deployed in the neighborhoods?
Okay, did you have a response or no? Mr. Rowe.
So to the chair and to the executive director, my request would be that we have the expert that is dealing with the GPO centered around ShotSpotter, and also Larry Jones, who works with the safety director and is responsible, if I'm correct, for bringing in a lot of this technology. We should possibly bring them in so that we can question them and get some answers around specifics on this. They would be the experts on it. The second part is to the community that's watching. Those who don't know, ShotSpotter is really a technology tool that allows officers to identify where gunshots are in certain communities. There are some that may be not, maybe against it, some that may be for it. But from me speaking as Commissioner Early, I understand that the department needs as much help identifying gun violence in our community as possible. There are a couple things that I want to highlight about Spot Shotter, which is one, I personally know of a case where a shooting happened in a neighborhood. ShotSpotter identified the officers. They were able to come a lot quicker to that location and offer first aid to the victim until ambulance services and EMS got there. There's also more recently where I was at the funeral of my goddaughter and shots rang out. Officers were alerted through ShotSpotter as well as 911 calls. And the way that we are concerned about how officers pull up to those scenes, I think is indicated here in Part E of the policy. But I saw firsthand where officers took their time to ask questions when they arrived and they listened. So it wasn't a matter of just pulling up, identifying a bunch of Black men at a funeral and then question us about who has a gun or who doesn't. It was more so of a concern about safety and more so a position of them listening to the people that were at the incident. So I'm saying this to the community so that you all understand as a community what this particular piece of technology is and how it helps your community when it comes to gun violence. Because oftentimes, I don't think it's a matter of people don't call the police. I think sometimes we just don't know where the shots came from. We hear them, we don't know where they came from, and ShotSpotter helps us identify where those particular gunshots came from. Yes, there is a concern about how officers respond when they pull up to a scene, and also the surveillance access when it comes to backyards, ring cams, all of that kind of stuff, which as a commissioner, I have to be honest, living in Cleveland and understanding the gun violence, we need as much technology and help as we can. And yes, it should be regulated, but I think that we're doing a good job and heading in the right direction when it comes to that. So I wanted to just let the community know what it was, how it can have a positive impact. Yes, there are some concerns, but we should not throw away the baby with the bathwater.
So I have a little bit of a procedural question. So, under the charter, we're also tasked with gathering community input on GPOs. And so, because and I don't believe that as a committee, we've kind of set up any process for that yet or procedure for what that looks like. And I did notice that there's that there's kind of a potential of voting on this. And I think especially because this is not one of the GPOs that is like in process, this has already been passed and we are making a revision to it. I was just curious how we're thinking about that process and if that's, are we just saying that because our meetings are public, that if that constitutes gathering community feedback, because that doesn't seem like a super proactive way of doing that. And I guess I want to make sure that we kind of have some of our ducks in a row about what process looks like in terms of, because I think that you're, Commissioner Wong and Commissioner earlier bringing up good points about, different community perspectives on this. And so I guess I wanted to see if we could talk about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and we do need to figure it out. Clearly, we're not going to vote on this tonight because the questions that come up, and even getting feedback from the division. So yeah, I think we should have that conversation going to figure out how we do that going forward and what that actually means. So I'd like us to move. I don't think we need to keep talking about this ShotSpotter right now, but if we want to talk about the community piece of it, maybe that's a thing we can spend some time on, because I think right now it's clear that we need to go back to the work group, and we have another meeting set up already in a couple of weeks. So, there was a meeting yesterday, but we'll have another meeting coming up.
So, and I agree. We did briefly I touched upon that in the work group. There was some discussion because we were focused on Fourth Amendment rights, I think. But now you see that it has obviously, whether it's a Fourth Amendment right, has a particular impact on the community. So I think I suggested at that point to make some questions for the outreach community to release in its survey, because the questions have not been finalized. And that also not to presume that the community doesn't understand the Fourth Amendment just because they're not lawyers, because I think there are communities that experience what it's like. I agree with you. I did have another question, Commander Carney. In the work group, I was interested in getting the data there was a pilot in the 4th district done by Commander Cutts. Would you know how I can get that data because there was a public PowerPoint presented in a safety committee meeting, but I just would like to get more details on what metrics were gathered and what the numbers are, because I am concerned, just to be completely open about this. In the work group, we also had many papers and studies, for example, a wide-standing study from Chicago that showed, unfortunately, regardless of the efficacy of the technology by itself, what it did operationally was increase police response times. As you can imagine, that an officer, and we are, losing officers, and you're not at what your intended capacity is, sending officers in 2 different directions, and that the study showed that the 911 call was much more substantive and salient in giving information. And I do also want to know that cities, even in Ohio, like Dayton, are not renewing their contract with ShotSpotter. I just think, given the fact that it's $100,000, I believe, per square mile to launch this software, I hope that we take a much more, even though we have a GPO, even though it's live, that we take a responsive kind of analysis to the technology holistically. We live in, especially when the technology can impact neighborhoods that are sometimes in intense economic stress. This may not be the best use of the resources that we have. So would you be able to tell me where I can get that data?
I don't know off the top of my head, we're from the pilot program, if we have that data available. So, if Executive Director Goodrick could just provide me with, the list of questions from the community and questions from the committees, I could provide some answers.
Okay,
hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to go, Commissioner earlier, I think?
Yeah. To our fellow commissioners on the policy committee, I do want to encourage us that as we talk about community input, that I want to encourage us to look back at the former reports that the commissioners did. They did a lot of legwork when it comes to work groups, community meetings, surveys, and that was just in 2022. So, my thinking is that the work has been done. If we read those reports, we can pull from that stuff to make sure that we have community input, former commissioners' input, and we're not holding up the process. Not to say that what you suggested is wrong, Commissioner. I support it, but I do want us to stand on the work that has already been done by the previous commissioners when it comes to work groups and community input.
I just want to make the committee aware of two important points that were brought up in the work group that haven't been discussed here yet. One is this policy was made, approved, and adopted after you all were already seated, right? So I want to be clear on that. This policy was not approached. The commission was already seated, but was not approached in the development of this policy. Two, the work group clearly identified, and I was there for the creation of all the search and seizures, right? This policy is in conflict with the search and seizure policy. We analyzed it, we looked at it. It lessens the standard for a stop related to ShotSpotter. The standard in the regular search and seizure stop policy is higher. So this is almost 1 degree lower with the criteria you need to justify a stop. So it is in conflict. It wasn't sent to the DOJ that we are aware of. It wasn't deconflicted in that way. So putting it back to the work group is okay, but keep in mind, it was the opinion of the reviewers of this policy that it is one, in violation of the consent decree and in conflict with the current search and seizure. So it means that right now officers can, because this is an operational GPO, right, do something less than what the search and seizure policy would say otherwise, wasn't related to ShotSpotter. So there is a time matter that this does need to be changed, and it doesn't have to all be a whole package deal. You already recognize that this particular part, Section E, is very vital in aligning it with the other search and seizure policy and ensuring the constitutional rights are protected. So the longer you withhold that, the more you increase the chance that it's okay. Because to your point, Commissioner Early, yes, I have no doubt that there are officers doing the right thing out there. But Matthew Richmond also looked at an audit of all ShotSpotter calls, and there were clear violations that even the safety director said those officers should be held accountable for breaking the search and seizure protocol on these ShotSpotter stops. And they were on video, they were on body cam. It was brought before council, and the safety director himself said there are officers who are violating our policy.
So if I can make a proposal, and I agree with that, and so it was, what I remember is that we focused on that part because it was potentially in conflict. We identified it as a Fourth Amendment issue and search and seizure issue. So I don't feel comfortable passing the entire policy, but is there a way that we can pass Section E and move it forward? And how does that look once we approve it? Commander Carney, do you still have to, because you've only seen this yesterday? What is the timeline look like if you want to accelerate this part?
I mean, it's, on the one hand, we definitely want to work in collaboration with the division and hear your feedback and if there are any concerns. On the other hand, these are not recommendations at this point, right? We are giving, this is how the revisions we need to see. So we do need to have the conversation. I hear Director Goodrick's point about the timeliness, and I appreciate your thinking about how we carve out the work that we've already done. So I'm open to
And I think
that
that's been
suggestion.
substantially done. It was like
Yeah.
4 or 5 meetings with
it was a lot of work.
Fourth Amendment experts, a lot of lawyers in the room. So, but we would love to get your operational knowledge because that is
Exactly.
I would just ask for maybe 2 weeks, if that's reasonable, for the commander to provide feedback.
That would push us to the February meeting for the full commission approval. So, I mean,
And February policy meeting, so.
yeah, right. So it gives us,
and we will go through the other parts in the
it's
meantime
reasonable.
too.
And I think it gives us some time to look at the community feedback portion. I don't know if the survey, I mean.
No, that's later on. That was later on.
That's a longer term thing,
Yeah.
but if there's other, looking at what you said about looking at the past work, and we can draw on your knowledge, Jason, and then think about, are there other ways we can reach out very specifically to community members,
But since we've already carved out this portion on E, regardless if it's 2 weeks or a week, once we can still meet as the surveillance tech sooner. Do we need to go back? I mean, then we had to come back to the policy because because these are imminent issues of the Fourth Amendment about where the officers can go. You know, that can have tremendous effect. Is it not possible to accelerate?
I think, it would still need the full commission vote unless,
Right.
and I think I know we have our next work group meeting on the 1st. You could certainly come to that.
So if
And
before the
that's- hold on a
first,
sec. And so, yeah, I mean, the 1st is 2 weeks from today, if my math is right. Yeah, so, or maybe 3 weeks from tomorrow. So if we could do it on that timeline, then it would come to that work group again. If we needed to talk about anything there, then we can move it to the policy committee in February and full commission on February 28th.
My only concern would be the Department of Justice and the monitoring team. I don't know if this policy was previously sent to them, but I'll have to check with Dr. Anderson to see if, because it is a change to a policy, it may impact the consent decree, especially if Jason's talking about search and seizure and Fourth Amendment rights. The Department of Justice may want to review this policy, but I don't want to impede your progress.
Yeah, but I think the idea of the process we're working on anyways, that we all, the division and the CPC come to agreement, and then it goes to the monitoring team and
Understood.
DOJ. So I think it fits in that likely process that we're working out, right? So I think,
this would be the portion that the DOJ would be interested in, is the search and seizure part. So I see nothing. We can move this part forward for most of the review, not through the commission, but I'm just saying the other parts, assuming that we don't have that much.
but we
that
haven't
many
changed
revisions.
anything else in
Yeah,
the other part.
exactly.
So I
But
don't
I'm
think
just
there's
saying-
anything for them to review because it's their policy that they passed in April, right? So it's really the parts that we are
No,
changing.
but I'm just saying, we don't have to hold this part's review back, because I think, I'm assuming the DOJ will want to look at the entire policy, but this is the portion that impacts the consent decree. If we can, how will we process-wise, how will we move this forward to the DOJ? What
After
do you
we
say?
vote the full commission, most likely. That's the process we're working. We haven't decided that process, but that would be a likely
So
process.
do we want to carve this out, this portion, because this is.
There's nothing to carve out. I mean, they're reviewing, none of the other language has changed, so I'm not sure what we need to carve out at this point. We can go back, we're gonna get their input on the parts we've changed.
So we've delayed it because we could technically vote on this portion
I thought
on the
you wanted
21st.
to have the group review. all
No,
that.
I wanted them, we've already reviewed this many times. It's the other
No, I'm
portion.
saying
The whole thing.
The whole thing has been reviewed, to be honest. I mean, I know
It's
I
not
wasn't
really
in
been-
the meeting, but I was at the meetings.
I don't think
yeah.
it was fully reviewed,
So,
so, but it doesn't, so regardless, if you think it was fully reviewed, it can move forward to the commission, and if he has comments, then we can, I'm just trying to move this, because otherwise, you're going to have this voted upon in February.
Mhm.
That is another month and a half that the search and seizure procedure, which Jason said was in conflict with the consent
Yes.
decree.
That's why I wanted to vote on it tonight, but I'm hearing concerns, not just yours. So, and then we're talking about wanting to get some feedback operationally from the division. So I don't know how we
I'm
accelerate it
just
more than
saying,
that.
moving this portion forward.
But that's the exact part we want feedback from, if that's what we want. Unless we just want to say we don't need
Well,
feedback.
we can,
I'm confused.
what if Commander Carney has no real, I mean, what if the other commander has
Commander
not
Scott.
that many, right?
Right. I don't know, the commander's schedule, so that's why I'm just asking for 2 weeks. He may be able, tomorrow's Thursday already, so, he may be able to provide feedback, as early as next week. I don't know what his schedule is, so that's why I'm just asking for 2 weeks.
Sure, yeah, no, it's not an unusual request.
To the chair, to the executive director, am I hearing you correctly that part E is the revisions that are in conflict or not in conflict with the consent decree? Just so that we're clear with the public.
To the chair, it was the belief of our group that worked on this, right? Also consider it that 3 of those members were the group that worked on all of the original search and seizure policy, right? So they know both documents inside and out. It was their belief that this is in conflict with the the stops GPO that's in place right now, right? Because in their read of it, it allowed a shot spotter alert unto itself to be criteria to cause to hold somebody for a stop, right? Which was less of a standard than the other GPO said, right? You had to have multiple
I got you.
points of information to be able to hold somebody for an investigatory stop, right?
I got
In
you.
this, it was saying that a shot spotter alert or implying that a shot spotter alert was enough to hold somebody. So that was their opinion that the wording didn't comport with the work that we had done in the past. And there was also no evidence that it was ever sent to the DOJ for comment. So it certainly wasn't it certainly wasn't sent to the court that we're aware of. And so the division must have known that this is a search and seizure issue, right? So
Okay, we got you.
there we had that concern.
But this
And
one
it
right
is
here,
section E, right? The revisions that we made to it should correct it and make it comport with the consent decree and be in line with our read on current policy that the other search and seizure. So the revisions here would correct the problems identified in the original draft sent to us dated April of last year.
okay, that was my question. It's as long as this revision is in compliance with the consent decree, then I'm good with it.
First, I just wanted to say to the chair, or through the chair to Commissioner Early, point well taken about the community input on the original work, and that I absolutely agree that I think that when we are building off work of the previous commission and that they have done community engagement on that, then I totally support that as applying to that. I think my broader concern is just let's develop a process so that for it's standardized, or at least can be somewhat standardized. I have a concern with the idea of sending a policy to the full commission without receiving feedback from the Division of Police first. I mean, I think that we want to, that doesn't mean that we're always going to agree with their feedback and make decisions based on their feedback, but the same way that we do not want to not be, not to be notified and not to have the opportunity to collaborate and offer feedback. I don't think that this would be a good, the first time we're approving a GPO to not be receiving feedback prior to doing that. So, I mean, I think that one thing we could do is I think we could pass it with the idea that if there's no major concerns by the division that are, sent to us by next week, then we could move forward with it. But I do think that Commander Carney's request of 2 weeks is reasonable. And this is the first time we're going through this process officially with the GPO, and so I think that there's, we have to figure out the process. But that's my concern.
And I agree. This is the first time we're doing this. I guess if we can, through this process, understand, for example, which commander it's going to there, and maybe we can, for every GPO, could we set a schedule collaboratively that we know where everything is due, and so that we can plan for these meetings, because, and even if, and I'm sorry that you received it just yesterday, but I do want to say that, collaboration, we have to, through the collaboration, we would, ideally what I see is that Commander Carney would issue something or issue draft, we would write our own draft. It doesn't, and we come together and hash it out. That would be a great way to collaborate while maintaining independence. I think that it is true because there was an imminent, the reason why we carved out that portion was we believe that was an imminent legal issue. So I'm fine with not passing the whole thing, but passing this portion and then pushing it to the commission. We can always bring it back. We don't have to, they can send it back to committee at that point. We'll have feedback at that point. Then we can edit that portion in the full commission meeting if need be with the feedback with it. That's actually only next week if the commander has time. Or if we're willing to call a special meeting to vote on this, because I think The reason why we were so focused on Part E was that it was of such imminent importance. And it's been since, when was this? Was April, right? When the shot spotter was active, the GPO was active. And I agree with Commissioner Early, but I don't know, has the previous outreach been done specifically on surveillance technology? Because that would be interesting to understand the community's perspective of how they balance their personal safety and their need for privacy.
So we did do a survey back when this was first being discussed. Obviously, this is not a randomized sample survey, so I can't say how representative it was. But of the 171 responses, 103 of them had a generally positive opinion of police technology use in general. Now, this survey asked about ShotSpotter, the use of drones, and the increased use of surveillance cameras. But in general, 171 responses were generally positive. 39 had mixed opinions on it, and 29 responses had generally negative opinions on it.
How were you said it was not randomized, how were these people solicited? Or how were they
It was a topic that was being discussed. It was this right around the time they were thinking about purchasing the system, so it was kind of in the news, and so we sent a survey out, kind of did a media blast, and some other people shared it as well, and that's how it was put out. It was on SurveyMonkey.
Thank you.
So,
So what are we gonna do?
So the question is, Commissioner Early, I feel like we have some different ideas here, so we could make a
Yeah.
motion, take a vote, or we could.
My last question before we go into figuring out if it's a vote. Again, revisions were done for E. The other part of this policy has been looked at as well.
I disagree with, and I'm not saying he's wrong. I don't remember it. I think it wasn't certainly hashed out into the committee. And my worry is not anything, because now I'm looking at it again. It has about the information that has to be taken. It's a long-term worry, right? Concern about the language in there. But E was many, many times looked at. So I feel very comfortable with E going forward. I just don't want to pass the whole thing and put our approval on something that maybe the work group will want to work on the other portions of it, but we focus on E. So I'm happy to carve out E, and that would be my suggestion.
All right.
And then you could just change E, right? That could be the if we agree.
Yeah. So my thing is, again, I want to encourage us to look at previous work that has been done centered around this, because again, this is in the recommendations of the previous commission, right? Work groups have been done. I am in agreement with the portion of the revisions to Part E. I think there's two things we can do. We can not vote on it tonight. I would recommend, this is not a motion, I would recommend that we vote on it tonight. It can go to the full commission, and if they do not accept it, it can come back to us. Progress is always what's important to me. Again, I'm highlighting on public record, work groups have been done on this. Recommendations have been made on this. The revisions that our work groups have done is in here. It's not that we pass it tonight and it's gold. It's that we pass it tonight and it goes to the full commission for review. And then that input can then be sent back to us. You even mentioned yourself, if there's disagreement, it can come back to us as a committee. So my suggestion would be that we vote on it tonight, the full policy, and I'll leave the rest up to our committee to decide. Thank you.
I have concerns with just voting on one part of it. I think the idea of then once we send it to the full commission, if it's approved by the full commission, at that point it would be sent to the DOJ. And I don't think it makes sense to send to the DOJ a section of the policy, especially if we're going to potentially change other sections of the policy. So I think that Commissioner Van Leers and Commissioner Early's points are well taken about, I think that, for the future, I would like us to, I think as Commissioner Wong identified, have a little bit more structure so that we are making sure that we have the law enforcement feedback, but also it's the first time we're going through this. And so I think it's normal and okay.
So I guess my question is there a motion on this?
Someone has to either second it. I I still believe that if we move anything forward, it should be.
Is there a motion? I mean, just make a motion.
I make a motion that, to move forward, that Part E is moved forward. I don't think that, I mean, it's still a contiguous policy. We're just saying this is a portion. I don't want to approve, to give any indication that we've approved the other policies. And I want to be clear, no revisions were done, no work was done on this, no collaborative work was done on this in the work group. Mr. You may have had private conversations. We never discussed these portions in the work group.
To the chair, I need to be on the record contesting that. I do remember even a detailed conversation that the commissioner was a part of about leaving the door notices, which is outside of section E. We spent a long time talking about the what they do after a shot spotter, all considered. And we always start at paragraph 1, page 1 when we go through these. So we did have that
So
conversation.
if we have a motion, I don't think, let's have a motion. So make a clear motion.
I would like the part that I feel that we have revised fully in committee, which I believe is Part E, to move forward. That is the most salient part about.
So your motion, I move to
move Part E of this section as a carve out to the full commission. They obviously will read the entire thing. And with the caveat that it can be obviously moved back to committee, but it's just to make it move forward, because I'm confident about that.
We have a second on that motion. I don't hear a second.
No.
Okay, so that motion does not move forward. All right, so let's move on to,
So I was going to make a motion as well.
oh, sorry.
My motion would be that we, as the policy committee, pass this GPO to go to the full commission for review. Not to go into, for discussion rather, for review and discussion, because they would get the email in advance, be able to review it, and then bring it back to us in our next meeting on the 24th for discussion. Not that it would be implemented or taken directly to the monitoring team or any of that, but the motion is that we pass it tonight in policy for it to go to review and discussion for the full commission. If there's any challenges, then they can then return it to the policy committee.
I'll second that.
Okay, so is there any discussion? Discussion.
I don't even understand what that means, because you
Well, ask
can,
a question.
okay, so Mr. Early, my understanding is you can just send this to people for review and we can discuss it. But there's no way to prevent a vote on it once it's moved through committee. Technically, this could be taken by you into the full meeting and vote on it. We don't have any rule against it. So if your motion is to limit the vote, if you just want to give people a review, a discussion, I don't know how to even limit that in the meeting, because anybody can vote on it. And that is, my concern is that the other portions haven't been moved, haven't been
To
looked
respond.
I
at.
have a question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, you're the chair, so I want to
No,
follow.
go ahead.
Okay. In response, I think the process is this again, is that any member of the commission, we 13 commissioners, we all vote on this, right, before it goes into full effect. My motion tonight says we as a policy committee we are approving this to send up the chain to the rest of the commissioners as a draft to review and to respond with any discussion, edits, or whatever that may be, and then allowing us to come back to make any changes if deemed necessary. For the sake of process, for the sake of moving this forward, it's fair on both sides. We, as the policy committee, have looked this over. We've made the revisions. Work groups have been done. We send it up and allow other commissioners now to read it, bring their edits to it, and that kind of thing. And the commission always has the vote to send it back to us as a committee if they do not agree.
Just one question for clarification. So you're talking about the entire, so the revisions plus this part that.
Correct. We're talking about the entire GPO plus the revisions, correct? Yes.
Okay. All right, I would like to call for a vote. I feel like we've spent an hour almost on our first. So do you have a quick question?
Yeah, I just don't you can send this to them. I don't understand, and you're moving the goal
So
so
there is
close
a
to it.
motion here, and
Right.
it's in
Yeah,
second,
just a
so I
motion,
think we
yeah.
just need to vote.
So what are we doing?
We are
Taking some,
voting, the motion from Commissioner Early, seconded by Commissioner Benito, was to pass this, the revised part and the other part, send it to the full commission for review and discussion, and clearly making sure it comes back to our committee for further discussion edits, and then we would have also, for sure, we would have feedback from the division, and then we would take it up at our
Be an
next meeting.
opportunity for community feedback.
Community feedback as well.
so, can we make a friendly amendment that no
Right.
vote shall be made on this in the commission? If that's what your intent is that it not be voted upon, you need to make that clear, that this cannot be voted upon.
Why would I do that?
Because it's not ready. You're saying it's already not ready. You want community feedback, you want.
No, I didn't say that. I'm on the record for what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, we as a policy committee passed this evening to go to the full commission for a vote. The commission then can say, all 13 members can say, we do not approve this, we want these changes to be made before we completely,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
different.
completely then what we vote on. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, that's
Did you
different.
still
from-
second?
To revise, edit, and then if, before they vote on it to say this is what the policy is, then it can come back to the policy committee.
I would clarify that motion that you're not sending it for discussion, we're approving it and then sending it to the commission as is the process for approval.
Yeah,
So in
but-
your scenario, it could well pass.
it could pass, but the commission then could, if they review it and study it and things of that nature, they can then say no, send it back to the policy
They can also say
committee.
yes. without
And that's the power of 13 commissioners
You're
voting.
again bypassing committee work and you're bypassing the work group work.
No,
This
Terry,
portion has not been
we're
revised.
not
Point
bypassing.
of order, this-
Yeah, we're not bypassing. I want to make it clear on the record. This is not about rushing it through or anything. Work has been done in this area. Work has been done. Revisions have been made. Now let's just let the commission give their input and their vote on it, and then we go from there. They can send it back to policy if they choose. If not, then it passes.
Okay,
My concern, I hear the concern about that if we leave it as is and put off a vote for one more month, that we are leaving in a policy that could potentially be resulting in citizens not having their constitutional rights respected. So I hear the urgency of that. I would say that my impulse is to say to wait until we have the feedback and to wait until if there's a concern about. It sounds like the full GPO has been reviewed by the committee. I see that there's some contention about that. My suggestion would be that we would move it to next month, but if I'm choosing between only approving part of it or approving the whole thing, I would move toward approving the whole thing, just because I don't think it makes sense to.
but no,
So
it's not
disrespectful.
Hold on, please.
disrespectful.
Hold on,
Oh
please.
my
Finish.
God.
Let the commissioner finish.
It's not disrespect. It's
It
just,
is disrespectful.
Point of
It's
order,
a
the
laugh
member
at
is-
somebody.
needs to
I'm not
let-
laughing at you. I'm
The
laughing
member
at the
needs to
situation. Oh my God.
When you're ready, okay? You are going.
That I have a concern with just approving part of it, just because our procedure is to then send it to the DOJ. And I think that if we change one part of it, then you could say that, well, if we change one part, do we have to review the whole thing for consistency? And so, but if the committee feels strongly about that, there's a sense of urgency that we need to move this forward to protect the rights of citizens, then I will vote with the committee on that. But my general impulse is probably to push it 1 month.
Okay.
I would love to hear the change perspective.
I would,
Not you.
so it's possible, I'm not laughing at you. It's just a little bit,
Please stay on the
right.
subject.
But
Just
I'm
stay on the
saying,
subject,
I'm
please,
staying on the
Commissioner.
subject because she mentioned
No,
it. I
Just
have a
don't
right
talk
to say
about what-
that.
Talk about
Let's
the
just,
issue at hand.
I'm talking about the issue. Thank you. The issue is, if the issue is the constitutional issues, that's why the carve out is there. But then you don't like the carve out because it contains the constitutional issue. If you're trying to solve the problem of the constitutional issue, take that part up. I mean, I don't understand that. And alternatively, we have a work group. It doesn't require meeting in public. I'm sure the lawyers can edit the other portions over email, so we could be ready for this. And I would, and if it's such urgency, then I would call a special meeting of this committee and the commission to vote it through.
So there's a motion.
Right. But he's saying
and
that to vote, right?
There is a motion, and does your second hold for his motion?
Yeah, I hold, but I would like to hear you.
I understand that.
Sorry.
I am torn. My main concern here is I had expected to vote this out tonight, and to some degree, it's on me for not having shared it sooner with the division. But my concern is that if I would love to get operational feedback. I mean, your folks are the people on the ground using this. But I'm also concerned that we did a lot of work on this, and I would love to move it forward. So. I'm a little bit torn by it, but my main desire is to move it forward, but also to have a process that we can sort of set the stage for how we're going to do this in the future and follow the best practice that we can do. So I'm a bit up in the air on it. So, but we do have a motion and a second, so we need to vote. So, Commissioner Benito,
Aye.
Commissioner Early,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong.
Nay.
I'm going to say aye, and I hope we can get some feedback as soon as possible. If it's possible to get it even before the 24th, which I know is only a week away, that would be ideal.
If we do receive feedback from the division, I would love it if we could try to have an emergency committee meeting to address that, or maybe we could come prepared to the meeting with amendments to the motion to try to address that. So I just want to add that.
To the chair, I was going to suggest the same thing. Even if our emergency meeting could not be face to face, we could do a public Zoom meeting as well. I do want to reiterate for the notes that I would like for Larry Jones to be there from Kerry Howard Public Safety's office, Kerry Howard's office. And then you said Commander Slaughter, correct? Slot, okay. And Commander Slot to be present in that meeting as well. That would be my
The
request.
vote has been taken.
Yes.
Is there any quick
I
relevant?
do have, yes, I would advise, from, what I've heard from municipal lawyers, not to do a virtual Zoom because this is a longstanding policy. State law does not recognize, our home rule about Zoom meetings. So it would have to be, especially, I think we should have special meetings in person anyways. But I would not advocate for that option.
Okay, so we'll figure that out moving forward. Is it super relevant?
Really quick. I would also say that I would say the same thing for if members of the work group have major concerns of other sections that there is contention about whether they have been reviewed, that could also be addressed in the same format.
Okay, great. So we'll check with the work group. We will be in touch with the division, and if there's anything you can do to expedite that would be most appreciated because we, like I said, we do want to keep this moving forward. So we're going to move on to the FUSIS DN update. There is in an email I sent out, and I don't remember, it's on paper here actually. Yes, it was sent out 2 days ago to the committee, and this arose out of a discussion with Commander Carney around trying to narrow down which divisional notice would come under our authority, which fall under the scope of Charter 1, Section 115.5. And so this list was created. We haven't really had a chance to review it. This is not something we need to vote on tonight, but this would again be part of a process that we would, the GPO resolution that we passed on the 19th of December that would have us, this would be part of a formalized process that we agree on as a full commission and have the commitment from not only Commander Carney, but also the chain of command at the division and the city. So are there any questions about that list? Does everybody have that? I think you all
It's printed there.
it's printed there. There's a printed copy. So basically, these are taken largely from section 115.5 as to what our authority is and what requires, CPC approval. Because as we know, at this point, there are a lot of DNs that really aren't that relevant to our work. So we want to make sure we're not bogging things down that need to go through more quickly when we have no real. And this is, I mean, it's Fuses. Fuses is like sort of like the poster child right now because there was a DN passed in Fuses that was given by the division. And that clearly is a policy issue that we are going to be working on, and hopefully in collaboration with the division, but with our work team, our work group, and our experts. Yeah.
I wanted to add crisis intervention under the big list.
I have a global comment about this. Why are we limiting prematurely our authority when it's all policies? I have a concern that, thank you, Commander Carney, for sending us now all these notices. And I understand that they are very necessary for daily operational needs, but they probably have a variety of senses of urgency, right? There's things that are, someone's coming back in division, other things, and they have also a diversity of impact. So I don't understand why when we have this on the list, we're excluding our authority, which I don't know legally what the basis of that is. I don't think we can exclude our authority with a motion. And these are the topics mostly that are in the consent decree. I see some of these things. Another thing that could be missing is vehicle searches. There's just a lot of, again, if you name what is in your authority, you are excluding by definition what you're not naming. I do want to say that the monthly corrective action notices, here's my proposal, this is why I was concerned about the authority versus the approval. Why is it that we don't say you can submit these divisional notices without our pre-approval? However, I don't want to give up our authority to correct these notices if we find something that is a content issue. Especially because we know from the monthly corrective action notices, those are the divisional notices for discipline. Is that what it means?
Correct.
In the past, there has been an issue, I'm not actually exactly sure, but the names of officers and the badge numbers were removed from these notices. To not give us ability to approve or have authority to deal with this, it will completely impact the work of the discipline and accountability committee. So I would propose that as an alternative. I don't know why that, I understand, that why don't we just say we can't pre-approve? Why are you shaking your head? Because I would like to know where this list even came up from. So what is the problem of just saying it doesn't require pre-approval, but we should still have authority over a content if we identify a problem?
Well, I can address some of that. So a lot of questions there. One of them is that because there's a bullet point that says, implementation of other initiatives, programs, and activities intended to support constitutional policing, continuous improvement in policing, I feel like that is sort of a catch-all that's very inclusive of issues that might be relevant to our work, that are relevant to our work, and that require our approval. In terms of why we want DNs to go through, I really think DNs are a shortcut, and we need to be in on that conversation. The Fuses is an example, and I think that's just a clear example of something that we really would want to engage with the division on. So we have Commissioner Benito, Commissioner Early, and Mr. Walker.
I agree about changing the language to say to determine which divisional notices require pre-approval by the commission. The reason why I was shaking my head is I think that we could have had that conversation about changing the language without it felt hostile to me, when I think it's a really simple thing that I agree with. Yeah.
So your point is taken?
Yeah, I think we can change it.
Yeah, I was going to say, similar to the chair, I think we can put authority and approval in there. I do approve of this list because it does capture what the charter says we are responsible for. Being one of the creators of the policy that was passed, the notices, divisional notices, for me were never to be approved, but for us to be made aware of, correct? That was my intention in the original, understanding that this can go from anything from catching a dog to, search and seizure. Not every divisional notice we need to approve, but I do agree with the list that is here. And then lastly, I would say again, I think that authority and approval can be included in the language of what we're doing, and it meets everybody's requirements.
Direct question for you, before Mr. Walker goes. Like when you say approval and authority, can you tell me like in sort of language what you mean by that?
I don't want to hold up the meeting, but we can work on the language of
You're
it.
not voting on this.
Yeah. So, I mean, because it says current proposal is that DNs that apply to the following areas would require CPC approval. We could then add and final authority if that's the case. But I think approval, yeah, okay.
Mr. Walker.
This is just a small detail. The monthly corrective action, DNs we found that those weren't particularly helpful. They kind of an analysis that we are doing in the discipline work group in the past. That's why it was requested disposition letters instead. It actually has more useful information on it. Just wanted to clarify.
Regardless, I mean, whether it has useful information or not, it could also, these are things that impact discipline and accountability. Can you explain to me, I have two questions. Let me make my other point first. Constitutional policing, the Constitution is not the only set of laws that govern policing. And I don't think that the charter.
Would you suggest a different language? I mean, this would be helpful to just say, okay, constitutional policing and.
I think that we can say just broadly, instead of having this list, just say broadly, these DNs do not require CPC pre-approval, but that we may be, if there's an issue with the content that violates what we believe to be either the consent decree or whatever language, charter language, and that we feel that we may seek to authority on, not to make you re-edit them or anything, but going forward.
So
and
just clarification, just want to understand what you're saying, because I want to know what you're saying. So you're saying that, I mean, there's a difference also between pre-approval, approval. I mean, whatever you're saying.
Approval could be
approval.
like final approval.
Right.
That's what it means.
Yes. So pre-approval is different from that. Or?
Pre-approval meaning that he has someone is coming back to division, right? Commander Carney does not need the commission to vote on
no
it
one said
and go through.
Pre-approval, I think here, right? I mean,
no, I would say no, but you say would require approval, and you're giving a list of things, so you're carving out the things. Presumably, anything that's not on this list would not require approval. Is the inverse true?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is to come up with a list which is inclusive enough, and if there's ways we can make it more inclusive, please.
So I think anything regarding discipline, and I apologize, this is why I asked Commander Carney. I know that DNs are issued for anything possible, like there's every scenario, but there's probably a population of DNs that's very, very common. One that has not been mentioned that's also impacts discipline is a potential change in case law. And my understanding is that case law is then read to the officer 10 times. And if that case law is not close to the statutory authority, that could impact discipline later on. But I would just, before we make this list, and could I ask, how was this list made?
Commander Carney, and after a discussion with Jason and I had, sort of looked at what made sense from, in terms of, you mostly looked at, well, you can explain it. And it was meant to be a discussion point. It wasn't some final list, so, yeah.
That's correct. So the last time we met, we were just trying to brainstorm and come to a resolution as far as without disrupting the operations of the division. And this language, it was suggested, I believe Jason suggested that I look at the 115 language. So just in collaboration, I made this proposal with language taken directly from 115.5.
Right. So I guess that's my concern, is that 155 actually, sorry.
So, yeah, Director Goodray.
Yeah, just 2 points. One is, I think there's some confusion here about what this can and cannot do. You can never outmaneuver the law. The law is the law. So it doesn't matter what you write here. This is about workload efficiency, recognizing that everybody needs to do their job, right? And DNs have to flow freely. What you're doing is making an assessment on what work is a priority for you. It does not in any way, nor can it ever take away your ability that if you saw a DN that wasn't on this list, to intervene in that. The law says you can intervene in any of those things that you have power to intervene in. So the idea that if you create this list, you're limiting your power of authority is just fictional. Yeah. It is untruthful. You cannot outright the law through a policy. The law stands above the policy, right? So you do not limit your authority in any way. You're just setting up a screening process to help guide your compass, because we all know this commission has more work under 115.5 than it could ever possibly handle. And that brings me to my second point. Commissioner, you have several GPOs that, in the name of efficiency, I'm hoping we can get through tonight so that you can show everybody that you're able to quickly assess GPOs and move them forward. I'm fearing that I think you should possibly table this list because you're not doing a vote on it and you have plenty of time to revise it still and work on it, because I fear this discussion is going to push the rest of the agenda
I
off
would
the
agree. I
table.
think this is just a discussion. It's been helpful. We can keep on working on it, but I do think we need to move on. One question I do have for you, Commander Carney, is we were getting emails with all the DMs, and those have they stopped or just there haven't been any? It was like the past week or so. I feel like I haven't gotten any. Which maybe is fine. But
I think the last GPO I saw had to do with
Yeah.
cold weather.
I got that one.
you got that one? Okay, because I just want to make sure, because we should be getting all of them. That's pretty clear. We should.
I'm just
Have
waiting
your
on
access to them.
the IT department. We did put
To
that
get that,
request in
right.
for your access.
So
for
it's
you all
not,
to
it's not that we
share.
won't see every DM. There'll be some clear ones that we are wanting to.
You'll receive any divisional notice
Right.
that's issued to date, and then once you have the access to SharePoint, you'll be able to access, I believe, up to
That's
5
fine.
years.
I think 2014.
Fun. All right.
Great.
All right.
And that will
All right.
provide you with the list of
Excellent.
all the notices.
So we're going to move on to hopefully a quick update from your committee.
I don't, just to be quick, we are moving our work group meetings to monthly to better kind of accommodate the schedules of all the commission, all the work group members. We are currently moving forward on 2 projects. One, we are working on the feasibility part, which is a review of the dispatch records. And we have a meeting set up with the Vera Institute of Justice to talk about whether they would be able to help us or if they can recommend folks who can help us with the data analysis. We are also in the process of requesting the OPS and IA investigation information on cases where Brazos form was filled out in the last 3 years. And we indicated in the request that we don't need to have officer information or names of the people involved, as the work group is just looking at it to identify trends in what issues might be coming up with behavioral health response. If we identify cases that we think we have some concerns about, at that point we would refer that to the accountability committee, in which a full investigative file with unredacted can be requested.
Question. If you're going to eventually potentially go to the accountability committee, why not have the full file? Why would what would be, you're adding, the only thing that's redacted is a name, right? Additionally, so you would have to request a new file, which is at least 21 days. Right now, it seems to be a little longer than that. So
Can I answer?
Yeah.
The answer is because we have non-commissioners reviewing it. And so I don't think that it's to protect the rights of people who have mental illness, who we are reviewing it to determine trends. So therefore, it's not necessary for people's community members' names to be included when the point is to review trends. And so then if something is flagged, then at that point, we could request additional.
So you
We
are,
would
but
send
you
it.
do realize these are public records to begin with? These are public records that have been presented in OPS cases on live stream on YouTube.
Yes, but all of my work group members have not watched those, so therefore they don't have that information. So even if they could make a public records request, then
But I think you're not maybe capturing my point. It is that they are already matters of public record, and to make the accountability committee to make them redact the records, it seems like completely needless work when it's a public record to begin with that was presented in a public live stream. I understand, and we have non-commissioners on our work groups. There's an agreement, that we're not going to reveal information. So it just seems like you're creating more work for the accountability committee eventually to investigate.
if a case comes forward, we don't even know if a case will
Well,
come forward.
do you think there's no cases that could possibly have an
I
accountability
didn't say
issue?
that they may
So
not.
you're creating a process that has, right now, I have not received any, I just want to be on record, I've not received any of my records requests,
So
so.
let's stay on, like,
You know,
I think
so, but
there's an
that is-
issue here, so I think you've made a major point about that. There is a records request coming that we've shared with director and the co-chairs. So I think, I don't know, it feels like we're getting into a lot of other areas here. But
Well, I
it's
just
a
don't
pretty
want the
clear record request
accountability-
for a specific use.
I understand, but why are we limiting that when it's a public record? And then putting it on the accountability committee to have to go get the record again and creating needless work and also delay? There could be a statute issue, there could be a timing issue with what you find.
So you have already requested the records of OPS complaints from the last 2
No,
years,
I
correct?
have not. I've only requested the OPS records from last 2 years for the departures with the
Okay.
chief and safety director.
Okay, so I mean, the overlap of which there may be a case that we are requesting that you have not already. I'm sorry.
I'm just like, there's no overlap. We don't know what the overlap is because I don't know what the cases are.
You were talking about a potential hypothetical situation in which we may have a case that we refer to the accountability committee, and then the additional hypothetical is that once that happens, that we would not have already. I think my point stands.
All right, let's just move on. We have limited time, we have about 40 minutes left, and I'd like to get through some of these GPOs. So the first one on our list is transitional duty, 1.05.13. Commander Carney, since you're here, would you like to talk about this and
Sure, thank you. The transitional duty general police order was drafted by the Occupational Health and Safety. And this has to do with temporary work assignments, alternative job duties, that in order to accommodate a member who is recovering from an injury or illness. The term restricted duty or transitional duty or details tend to be used interchangeably, and really they are two different things. Where the restricted duty, I drafted that policy, I believe about 10 years ago initially, and so this just makes the changes and defines what those duties are, rather than the restricted duty has to do with members who are maybe are on an administrative restricted duty and temporarily unable to perform regular functions because of criminal charges, administrative investigations, or serious rules or violations where the contract, the city would follow the collective bargaining agreements as far as misdemeanor charges. The officer would not be suspended from duty. They would just be placed in a RD or a restricted duty assignment. Whereas if the officer was charged with a felony, the contract provision would be that the member is suspended from duty without pay. So the restricted duty is more the administrative and not anything to do with temporary job duties related to a member's health or disability.
right? So you basically, the two taken together, restricted duty and transitional duty, are just separating those two things very clearly, trying to really clarify which is which. And so the transitional piece is when there's an injury or some illness that makes them unable to do the work that they were supposed to do, so they get some other duty. The other one is when there's been a not a felony but other violation.
Correct.
I had a question under on section 4 under A. It says
Which one, the transitional?
oh,
duty or-
sorry, yeah, transitional duty. Thank you. It says that work assignments are to be made to accommodate the member's bona fide medical restrictions prescribed. I was wondering if you could tell me why bona fide is included in here.
I didn't include that in the policy, so that may have been from occupational health and safety. I would interpret that language to mean that documented medical restrictions
Right.
that have been reviewed by occupational health
Okay.
and
I think
determined to be a restriction or a disability.
my concern with that is just that I think that this language is seems a little stigmatizing, as if like there's already a lot of stigma for people with disabilities that they're making up issues, or that they're requesting accommodations because of just because they want to. And I think that if you're already saying that they have to be prescribed by a physician, I think that I would either say if it's a matter of it needs to be approved by a different body, I would just include that in there and remove that language.
So if there's any comments or feedback to any of these policies that we're discussing here tonight, I would just ask for something in writing so we could go over them with the subcommittees or the committees that worked on these individual policies, or in this case, occupational health and safety. But I'm not objecting to your concern.
Might be a silly question, but does the transitional duties, this GPO, work with those who are pregnant or expecting child? Yes. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
I just have a general comment. I haven't taken thank you for sending that Excel chart. So this was on a schedule, all these GPLs to be, is there a reason, because my concern is while we've reviewed it, I don't think who has reviewed these? It was Mr. Goodrick, and like I was under the understanding that we would be reading through these very carefully and reviewing them as a matter of process and policy, and then we shouldn't be hurried. I'm not suggesting that you hurried us, but that was precipitated by the reason why we have 5 GPOs to review and a lot of other stuff is that from my observation, we didn't build a process before saying asserting authority. And I'm just concerned that this could establish a pattern. And Commissioner Benito did, I had the same reaction because bona fide is kind of judging whether somebody is telling the truth or, so these are very small nuances that need to be found. So these have been reviewed by Law Director Griffin. Have the Law Department reviewed it?
No, I don't believe that this was sent to the law. This is still in its draft form. So, at our last policy meeting, I made the commitment to provide any of the draft policies that I'm aware of for CDP. So, understanding the concern of the commissioners, the division is fully committed to working collaboratively at the onset, the beginning of the process with the general police orders. These policies, this particular policy, transitional duty, I did not draft. I just made the revisions to the restricted duty policy because of its impact and affecting the restricted duty policy.
So, Commander, a question for you.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I was just
Just to
asking,
follow up.
so which, these are drafts, do they have an intended with, say, we weren't here, the commission, what are the intended dates that you wanted them out probably not just as soon as possible. They're still in working order with your work group, or
Yeah, I mean, we're getting to the final stages, right? Like these particular policies are more about processes. I don't think it would be, or it would be my opinion that they do not touch on the consent decree at all, that there are not any deliverables required by the settlement agreement. So, sooner than later, preferably, these two policies aren't, the priority right now. I think we prioritized those at the last meeting of what
The transitional and
yes, the transitional and restricted duty, I would, recommend that the committee, review the policies in their entirety and any feedback or comments, in a reasonable amount of time.
Okay, so because we had, you had mentioned ambulances, for example, is one of the more priority
Correct.
ones. So,
Right.
so what I'm hearing you say is like right now, what you'd like is feedback, and then it might come back to us for approval as such at a different point in the process. Is that-
Correct. I don't want to, I'm not trying to rush the commission.
Okay. Good.
So-
Commissioner? Executive Director.
I just want to again make a point. So you have to think about your whole work logistics, right? If you want to read every paragraph and take every paragraph through policy and work group, you will find yourself bogged down with infinite number of administrative policies to argue over a few words without even knowing if the word you're arguing has a significant impact on the division at all, right? You don't know right now with just taking your example. I agree with you, right? But this is standard policy in most places that, if you're looking for a medical exception or time off, all they're saying is they want it from a legitimate doctor that's bona fide. There are illegitimate doctors out there, and this division in its 100 years of history has seen all kinds of people come with workers' comp scams and all that stuff. So I think bona fide is a word that you'll see in a lot of policy around, requesting time off or restricted. So my recommendation to this commission and to Pete, the chair, was pick some policies that you can move forward quickly, that you don't have a real vested interest in spending a lot of time on, and advance those policies and let the division do its job. So these transitional, restricted, the animal policy has been reviewed by the DOJ. There's nothing really major in there. What is your stake in the community stake? And you have to assess that, right? Is this a major community concern right now about restricted duty or transitional duty? Or is it in the best interest of the commission to move this work forward and let the division put these policies in place, recognizing that if a problem were to occur, you can always come back to it, right? But there's no need to overly get into the weeds of every single policy presented to you. You really have to learn to strategically figure out what you can move forward efficiently and what things you need to spend a lot of time on. And if you get into the practice of spending a lot of time on every single policy before you, you're going to find yourself overwhelmed, and you won't be able to spend as much time on the policies that are critically important to the commission. That is why my recommendation for these policies that you see today, to put them on the agenda, see if you can move, if there's no major concerns, right? Major concerns, my recommendation was move them forward and give them back to the division so that the division can do its job and put them in place as quickly as possible. Right?
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought you were first.
I wholeheartedly disagree, because I think that there is, I think the commission in recent time has taken a lot of shortcuts and bypassed the checks and balances that we need to get work done. Speaking from the perspective of accountability, everything is important, right? Because everything could be a disciplinary issue. I'm not suggesting that we go through every single paragraph, but we do have people, I mean, if things haven't even gone through our stated lawyer, Mr. Griffin, I think it's problematic. And we are here again, not simply to fulfill the consent decree, but to oversee the police in a much more holistic way and help the division become a more trustworthy stakeholder in the community. What I would recommend is that, and I realize we may not have the subject matter expertise to even look at these things, I would recommend a work group being started for the less kind of not, less, I don't know what the term would be, less impactful, or less immediate GPOs, and that we at least get a lawyer in there to look at these things. Because I would certainly hate to get to arbitration and there is too much ambiguity in a word, and that the arbitration of the officer falls apart on that, and that will happen.
Commissioner Early? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna make a motion that we, as a policy committee, pass the transitional duty GPO. And from my understanding, if I'm correct, it would then go to the full commission for a vote. So they'll have time to review it, make any recommended changes or suggestions, and then they can always send it back to the policy committee for that. But that would be my motion, that we pass the transitional duty GPO.
I'll second, and I'd like to make a friendly amendment.
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. I will make the friendly amendment of removing the bona fide.
Are you gonna replace it with a word? I think it probably does need a word.
I don't think so, because it says that accommodate the member's medical restrictions prescribed by the member's physician of record.
Can we have some debate on, so I'm really troubled by this constant kicking. I was under the impression we would have a full discussion of every GPO, maybe not through the work groups that we'll pass through here. It seems now we're just going, and even Commander Carney saying that he's not finalizing a lot of this stuff, and we just keep kicking the can to the commission. And we know, I'm just gonna say it on record, we've had instances, not because things weren't sent in time, that we know that certain commissioners had not even read it. Because I know, because they asked me. I know that they asked me like right before, oh my God, what do I need?
Point of
So-
order, like, let's talk about what we have
So
before us. So if you're saying that we haven't
So I'm
read it
just-
or something, or. 'cause we
What
had
I'm
these for a
saying is
while.
that what is the point of this committee if we're not going to be hashing out these GPOs? I disagree with Mr. Goodrick that this is part, yes, we're just picking and choosing what is important, what is not important. You are seeing policy in a vacuum. From the perspective of accountability, I see that every single GPO is important because every single GPO can mean that an officer is disciplined. And shouldn't we be acquiring this knowledge? I mean, if this work, so the argument seems to be this work is too much for us, so we're not going to do it. We're just going to take shortcuts. And frankly, I think that's insulting to what the community has put us here for. If you're not ready to read these GPOs and go do the work, then maybe people should not be on this commission.
So there's a motion? Is there a further discussion on the motion?
Well, I need a friendly amendment. So
Yes.
we need
Oh,
to
right,
vote.
you're right.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry for that. You made a motion for the friendly amendment.
I second it.
Second it. Vote on that, Commissioner Benito,
Aye.
Commissioner Early.
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
I abstain because I don't know what the legal ramifications of that is.
and I vote aye, so it passes.
Can I
Yeah.
just to respond to the concern, I think one thing that we need to, in terms of addressing our role and what process we go through, in terms of we do not, I have a concern with the idea of us going through each GPO line by line. And okay,
Yeah, I
fine.
think we
Okay,
don't need to have that
I can,
discussion.
but I think, okay, I do think that there do seem to, anyway, I'll leave it.
So is there any further points that haven't already been made before we vote on Mr. Early's motion? Now's the time. Okay, so let's vote on the transitional duty GPO. Commissioner Benito,
Aye.
Commissioner Early.
Aye.
Commissioner Wong.
No, because it has not been properly reviewed. I have to give, I'm allowed
no,
to
you-
give my
you-
reason.
actually,
No, I
you've
do,
made your
because I don't
reasons.
want it to be used against me in the past. Ryan, please put that, I'm saying no because I do not believe it felt,
Actually,
Real
in Robert's
process.
rules, you vote no and you vote
no.
yes, and you've already.
I don't know if
explained
that's
your-
true, Mr. Van Leer, and I'm still able to give my dissent.
All right, so I vote yes, and so this transitional duty passes 3-1. So next up is restricted duty, which Commander Carney has already described. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on restricted duty GPO?
I didn't have any comment on this.
Really? Commissioner Wong? Okay, hearing no discussion, call for a vote on the restricted duty GPO. Mr. Benito,
Aye.
Commissioner Early,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallen,
No,
Mr. Van Leer, yes. All right, animal incidents, next up. Commissioner Carney, would you please make a brief presentation on that?
Yes, so this particular policy, I believe was up for its annual review. It is one of the consent decree related policies. It was vetted through the Department of Justice and a monitoring team. They provided comments and feedback to the policy, which is italicized for any of the changes. I believe the only changes to the policy, any substantial changes were in section 7C, as far as the euthanization of animals. And how that came about was we have many animal incidents in the city of Cleveland, specifically with deer being struck by vehicles this time of year. And I believe that it was the resources that were being used, particularly in my bureau, to have the supervisor respond whenever a deer was being euthanized. The resources could be better used, honestly, and was not an efficient process that we were doing. After a lot of research that was done, and what we're doing, conducting these investigations, I don't feel that an on-scene supervisor, they could do that themselves, and there's no special training that I've had that would make me a better investigator for something as simple as euthanizing a deer. But the other procedures remain the same as far as the reporting requirements, and the inspection unit would still review the investigation of the on-scene supervisor and note any policy violations if that applied.
Thank you. Are there any questions you want to talk about? Mr. Long?
So I had a community member reach out to me that she found a deer that had been shot with a gun in Glenville with bullet holes and also a groundhog. When the officers came, they did not take a report. They did not. It was clearly like there were wounds. Is it clear what is because it says shall notify. Yes, it was dead.
Oh.
Yeah. They said that, I guess, groundhogs. I mean, the problem is she's an animal lover, but on top of that, you're having people you can't hunt, in a city. What would you, so it says notification. So it doesn't really say, does it say enough about that they must investigate? And if there is like an animal carcass that has a gunshot, right? This is not something that was hit. This is not something that died of some tragedy. Is there a GPO that talks about abused animals or things that, or should this be in this GPO? Because unless I read this a while ago when you sent it. So is that enough? Is that covered under another?
This policy just pertains to officers, when necessary, when they encounter an animal that may or may not take an aggressive posture towards the officers. And if it was an attacking dog, that would be a critical firearm discharge that would require the force investigation team if the officer were to discharge a firearm and an aggressive animal. This particular policy is specifically, I think, related to dog incidents or deers and euthanizing those animals, 99% of the time would just be from being hit by a vehicle. And I understand your concern, or the community members' concern as well, because I myself am an animal lover. So, we do have Cleveland codified ordinances for that as far as animal abuse. I'm not familiar with that particular incident.
Your officers refused to make a report. I think those are multiple levels of issues, and that if someone is abusing an animal, or they could, that. So that would fall. I just want to know if that would just fall under not making a report. Is there a GPO that would deal with something like that?
Yes, if there was a crime that occurred, which by what you're telling me, I don't know the facts of the incident. So I don't know if there was a report that was generating. I'm just taking your word for it that there was no report made. So, but if there was an animal abuse, like I said, we do have, I believe it's in chapter 6 of the Cleveland codified ordinances for animal abuse, which would generate a report.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's helpful context to clarify it. So, anybody else have?
So one thing that I did notice in reviewing this is that there's it says a few different times about that should not deploy weapon unless it's reasonable and humane. And I did not, and that comes up a few different times, but I did not see a definition of reasonable and humane. I know it kind of talks a little bit in section B about if an animal is so severely injured. So it sounds like that's one place where that would be considered reasonable and humane. But I guess my question is, do you think that it would be helpful to have a set of definitions around what fits what criteria that meets in order, or are you kind of considering that that's common sense?
Is that an italicized language in the paragraph? I'm not seeing.
Yeah, and under section 6, it says section B, it just said shall not fire or deploy a weapon to kill a seriously sick or injured animal unless its euthanization is reasonable and humane. And then it also puts under here, there's a couple other places that shows that.
Yeah, I don't know if we could necessarily define
Yeah, it could be kind of
that. I mean,
difficult.
that's existing language from the GPO, and my interpretation of
That's one,
of 6B is just that officers shall not, which is underlined, just unnecessarily kill injured animals unless it's reasonably necessary to do so, right? Which is, again, usually from my experience reviewing these investigations has been a deer struck on a freeway, or even in a city street that's unable to walk and is more than likely going to die, and is just suffering.
So, yeah, just looking at the language, I think, thank you, Commissioner Benito, for raising this. It does seem like, it'd be hard to put all the criteria in place, but it does seem that there are, in set 1 and 2B, 1 and 2, there's talk about severely injured, seriously injured, and the extent of the animal suffering and public sensitivities involved. So it does seem like there is an attempt to provide some context for that. Commissioner?
So while I think you and I would know probably what when to euthanize, because animal lovers, I think, can be trusted. My boyfriend at one point, he's a firefighter. He was just driving by, very short story, but that's very salient. And he saw 2 cops just staring at the ground. And he said, "What's going on?" And there was a dog that had been hit. and they were just staring at it. And we're like, we don't know what to do. This is not Cleveland Police. And he said, I'll take the dog. And he took the dog, and she just had a broken jaw, and she had a chip, and she's perfectly fine now. But they were, she was severely bleeding. So my question is, are the officers trained in how to, I know that they don't have to be vet techs or anything, but are they trained to assess an animal? And do they know to take the animal to emergency vet? Does it say that?
Terry,
What?
come on,
What?
move on. This
Why?
is ridiculous.
No, this is about it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, this is just.
Yeah, thank you.
How is it ridiculous when we're trying to,
Forget it. You're cutting into public comment.
we're not gonna, well,
So
we've had a long discussion before then, but I just wanna know what is the
think we need to
training?
move on, so-
What is the training that's involved for officers to assess what Commissioner Bino said? Is there any training? It's just their judgment?
So the division is currently, because this policy was already approved by Judge Oliver, and by the monitoring team and the Department of Justice, the division is currently receiving training on the policy itself, which requires 100% passing of the test. And I believe it's due January 31st, where all the division members are required to take the training. As far as officers being trained as to diagnose an animal, I would say no.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion that we pass this,
Before,
this,
the chair.
ambulance GPO is.
just real quick before you do that, I do want us to know that this GPO does refer all the officers back to the Division of Animal Care and Control. So, yeah, they're on the scene. They are the ones that help make those decisions. It's not just the officers. Just wanted to make that known to the
Thank
public.
you. So
Thank you.
the motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion, further discussion? All right, Commissioner Benito,
Aye.
Commissioner Early,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong, Commissioner Van Leer, aye. All right. Moving on to the final GPO, and we can extend the meeting if we need to, okay.
I'll pay the overtime.
With that,
I said I'll pay the overtime.
thank you. Post-traumatic incident protocol 1.05.08. Commissioner Carney, a brief summary.
So this post-traumatic incident protocol, I don't want to speak on behalf of occupational health and safety. I believe that there was some conflict with the language of the original policy, and that this needed to be amended. This is in conjunction with the transitional duty policy or related. It should be italicized, I believe, in paragraph 3, A, B, C, and D were the only changes, and that has to do with the medical director and occupational health. I mean, there were some changes to occupational health. I mean, it's just it was called the medical unit before, and now it's called occupational health and safety unit. So it's all civilians and doctors and attorneys in there. So we don't have sworn personnel, accessing personnel files and HIPAA protected information. So Kat Houston did a great job with this transitional duty policy, and there were some necessary revisions that also needed to be made to the post-traumatic policy that conflicted with this policy. So they're all kind of interrelated with restricted duty, transitional duty, or this post-traumatic incident protocol. And this is also drafted through our employees assistance unit, and Sergeant Dawson, she did a wonderful job drafting this policy as well. But again, these are just drafts, so I sent them just for feedback from the commission.
Commissioner?
Yeah. I have a couple pieces of feedback. So I'll just go through them. I thought overall I was really impressed by this, and I'm really glad that we have such a clearly laid out post-traumatic incident protocol. One thing that I wanted to add was on point 2 under definitions of traumatic incident, and I understand that this may include but are not limited to, but when it says a member involved in or witness to an incident resulting in the death or serious physical harm of another person, I was also going to suggest or the aftermath or a different word for that, because I'm imagining an officer showing up where they're not watching the incident occur, but they're coming and seeing the crime scene afterwards, which can be quite traumatic. And so that was include language that I wanted to suggest. There might be a more police verbiage way of saying that, but that was one suggestion. Are you keeping track? I can also send an email. Great, perfect. The other one was on the list of the notification of communications control section. I wanted to suggest incident involving a family member of an officer as something that would trigger notification to the communications control section.
Where you
Here in the list of different
at? Okay.
yeah, it would be after K. And that might be addressed in a different policy. If there's a policy about family members of officers that are involved in incidents, but that was one thing that I thought. And then the other, under section 2, under use of deadly force traumatic incidents. So one thing that I wasn't completely clear about when it said incidents resulting in death or serious physical harm, is that only for of an officer or of a subject, or is it of anybody?
Okay.
Which section?
Section 2 here. It says point 2, number A, incidents resulting in death or serious physical harm.
That's anybody, doesn't have to be an officer.
Okay, so anybody, okay, cool. And then on point 5 of there, one thing it says shall participate in a post-traumatic event recovery program that includes, and then it gives a long list. When it says shall, does that mean that every single officer has to do every single one of these things?
Yeah, should,
Oh,
so the member shall meet with the stress consultant and then any recommendations from the stress consultant, which would be A through I, may apply. The stress consultant, Dr. Franklin may recommend alternatives or different variations. She's the expert, so.
So I suggest that they have to do all of these things.
Yeah, so I was just going to suggest that adding the language may include.
Well, I think it says at the frequency determined by the stress consultant and the member, right?
At the frequency, yeah. But I think that's about the follow-up. It's not about, because I think that I hear your point that it's saying shall refers to that they have to participate in the recovery program. But I think that then the shall does not refer to that they have to do every one of those things. It might be a small distinction that doesn't matter very much, but that was just my suggestion, that we say that may include, just so that if,
You do sound like big things, and there is some flexibility.
To the chair, you have 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you may want to put this one off to the next meeting.
that was all of my
If
items.
that's-
Yeah, so
And-
there's the Word documents that I provided to the CPC. So I would love to see the feedback and red line edits that you all have. Any comments, please send them back to me and then we'll review them.
So if you want to extend, you have to
Yes,
vote to
we'll
extend.
talk about that.
Move to
So, you're moving to extend? Okay. Do we, just a quick question before we do that, do you have update about the accountability committee? Is that agenda item something we need to talk about?
We can put that on there, yeah.
You want to talk
I
about
can
this
give
one?
a very quick update if you want.
Okay. All right. So Do we have a motion to extend
Motion
by
to
10
ex-
minutes or?
15 minutes,
15
public comment,
Yeah.
and 15
Okay.
I
minutes.
second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Um, Okay, so I do want to reiterate that I find it very just hard for me to listen and edit
So,
that way. So if we
I
can
would like us to
re-edit,
keep moving.
I understand that, but this is it's incredibly
We just
difficult to
closed that
knowledge.
issue, so let's.
Well,
You're
and
up.
this is, all right.
On the other issue.
For clarity, just for clarity, we're not voting on this one tonight.
We are not.
Okay.
Sorry, we're gonna take it up later.
Okay, so the accountability committee work group, it's not the accountability, it's the discipline work group within the accountability committee. This was the accountability committee previously in 2019, right, has worked on these issues. And it was involving broadly the discipline system and trying to make it more fair and consistent and transparent and the matrix. So when Commander Carney, he sent a number of the commissioners the corrective action GPO, which has taken up a lot of the changes that Jason and Sergeant Jackson have worked on. We're not quite there yet on, and that's an incredibly important GPO, as we can all agree. We're not working on that yet because we were also sent a manual of rules, which I understand was based on, it's a new project for you too. If you want to explain maybe for the audience what the manual of rules is and how it's different from a GPO.
Thank you. So the corrective action policy, or form, it was known as the disciplinary guidance policy. That's what it is currently. It's been a 5-year revision based upon concerns of the Department of Justice, the community, the monitoring team, and it also has arbitration decisions that are incorporated into the language. Before the new CPC was established, I incorporated the 115 language into the policy. That's probably the biggest change, but also Executive Director Goodrick and Rich Jackson, we worked collectively with the previous commission to incorporate the CPC recommendations, specifically adding, I think that the most substantial change was adding another group category, which were concerns of the CPC, which would be a presumption of termination for the most serious of offenses. But I think on a positive note, it also incorporates the non-disciplinary action, which is just as important, such as coaching and counseling, mentoring the officers for the minor policy violations, because it can't always just be sticking it to the officers. There has to be, just some combinations and recognition of the officers and their hard work. So this has been an ongoing project. We've narrowed down all of the revisions. I think the only comment remaining that's still up for debate with the monitoring team and DOJ is paragraph G. I don't have it in front of me, but it has to do with the stacking language, which is a concern for me in that language. So we have to work that out with the monitoring team and the DOJ. As far as the manual goes, the original manual of rules that I'm familiar with was from 2000. I was part of the revisions that were made, I believe, in 2012, which was the current manual, which is too old in my opinion and outdated. So, based on law enforcement best practices and researching other departments, specifically Denver PD, I incorporated some of that language and created that manual over the past couple of years. So.
Okay. So, and the manual of rules is kind of like the Bible of not to be overly rich, but that it would supersede everything, right? If there's a conflict, it would supersede a GPO, the union contracts. And if I can say,
well, not the union contracts.
not that,
yeah.
It would not
No,
if there's a conflict?
if-
Because there was, I think there might have been a conflict about alcohol, usage.
So the collective bargaining agreement would supersede,
Super.
supersede a GPO or a rule. So the manual of rules is more specifically just rules and not procedures. They're just rules, guidelines to follow for the officers, but they do also have one of the monitors recommended group. Those particular rules have defined group offenses, and so we could properly categorize those if they did violate those rules.
So I think somebody did, I think it supersedes, it said in there it supersedes a GPO, but if, I guess that could be a lingering question. Why are the union, there might be instances why the union contract and the manual and the GPOs are in conflict. So I guess that could be further conversation, but we are working on the manual of rules. What we have discovered is that we want a more global attempt to make sure that terms are consistently used across the board from the manual to the GPO, and hopefully we can get some input from the unions on this, just to make sure that it is understood and that there was a chain of command. I think it's very difficult. Maybe the suggestion was to maybe have a chart, it would
Right.
be easier to explain. So we are currently working on that. It's obviously, and it's a big undertaking for everybody. So we're happy to give you updates. And if you want to come to that work group, that would be great. Do we need to talk about the second item? We can table that probably.
And I would just,
I think we should.
could I just say one more thing? I would just say that the unions also need to have their opportunity, both FOP and the CBPA, to review these policies in a manual to provide their feedback as well.
Okay. So I think, and we haven't even given this manual to the accountability committee members because it was requested from the work group that they be, allowed to have their independent assessment first and and that I think is actually the best for collaboration because we want the best ideas to be on the table and not just a emotional negotiation between the parties. So.
All right. So you're done with that part? All right. I would say, out of respect for the community, still has to have a chance to talk. I mean, is there a reason we don't need to do the
Performance GPOs.
performance evaluation GPOs tonight?
No.
So
I did have, Mr. Tura did have a question. I can send it to you if you feel comfortable asking. He wanted me to ask it because
let's
he's not.
send it. Let's
Okay.
just send it separately. All right. So now, public comment. A little bit late.
You wanna go? You wanna go? No, you go. No, you go. I cannot. I can't.
Somebody please.
Is it on?
Yes.
Hi, this is Rosie Palfy. I was a member of the Mental Health Response Advisory Committee for 7.5 years. Sorry I'm not wearing my Team Jason, Team Ryan t-shirt because I wasn't planning on going. I flew in here on my broom because I cannot believe what I'm seeing. Terry, you are so smart. You have so much to offer, and you're putting up all these roadblocks. You do not have to fight for everything. I am really frustrated. You and Pete did an amazing job yesterday on your radio show that you did. Thank you both very much. I was here months ago, and I have an issue with Pete and Reverend Early because I told you how shady the city was with updating the crisis intervention policies. They took out 17 words that could have helped someone like Tanisha Anderson by giving the police the opportunity to call EMS instead of taking somebody to the hospital in a police car. Okay. And so I told you about this, and nobody asked me about anything that I talked about. I could have sent you guys emails. And so I'm really concerned with what's happening now with what you guys just passed, because honestly, it looks like grandstanding. And I know that you genuinely care, but I got to tell you, I don't even know what happened. I'm trying to figure out what happened. I've watched meetings. I've read news stories. I can't figure out if the police department put out a divisional notice and that caused the controversy, or if they put out a general police order. The problem is this is all getting lost in the shuffle. You brought up Commissioner Benito's records that she's working on. So this is what you don't understand. You're correct. All of that information is public record. I don't know if you've looked at an actual incident report or a crisis intervention report. What isn't public record is the medical part. They redact somebody's diagnosis, where they went to the hospital. You guys don't need to see that stuff. I'm really concerned about, I was invited to be on the behavioral health work group. I guess I'm sort of part of it, but I'm concerned about people who aren't appointed seeing some of this information. Okay. And then the other thing is, like, this is a joke, honestly. I have to apologize to Captain Simon and Commander Carney and Jason and Ryan. I'm sorry that you have to sit through this. There's some of us that have been working on the consent decree for 8 years, and you all want to focus on your power that's in the charter. You have to start with the consent decree, okay? So talking about this stuff is kind of ridiculous, because the consent decree gives you a to-do list. Search and seizure, use of force, crisis intervention. There's maybe 8 different things. That's what you guys need to work on, and not worry about restricted duty and some of this other stuff. I'm an animal lover, but I mean, seriously, you want to get in the weeds about that? I mean, and Open Meetings Act, if your lawyer friends want to provide their advice, they should come to the meetings, okay? Because you come in here and say that this supersedes the charter, the city has rules, you're telling them they can't have a Zoom meeting. If you guys can't have a Zoom meeting, then why did you have a special Zoom meeting online to vote to approve $1 million in community grants? That wasn't a problem? So I don't know. All I can say is everybody needs to get it together. And if you can't get it together, it's time to resign, because you're holding, I see you rolling your eyes. You're holding up progress. You're holding up progress.
Please don't.
And
I'm being defamed right now, so I'd like to respond.
well, you know what? If you don't even understand what
I
defamation
spent
is.
so many hours talking to you to give
Point of
you
order, let's let the committee members
information.
speak, and
And because you don't understand what is happening right now,
keep it to your, you're out of
thank
order,
you, Ms.
please
Benito,
stop.
for telling me I'm out of
Just keep it
order.
to the-
Thank
Okay.
you.
All I can say, people, is, there's nothing wrong with bringing up a concern in a meeting. But after that, move on. Send an email. There's really important things that need to be done. And honestly, this is embarrassing. It is embarrassing. And I just hope the new leadership, when you all elect new leadership, that you actually focus on what matters. I'm not saying this stuff doesn't matter, but you shouldn't be getting into it right now. And the other thing is, have you guys ever talked to any police officers? I mean, these are words on paper. Have you talked to them about doing their job? Okay? Because they're not pulling out GPO. And, I love animals, but you want to worry about a deer that's been shot? What about the people being shot? And so I don't know. You guys are supposed to work collaboratively with the community and the police department, and I'm really not seeing collaboration. I'm seeing obstruction, roadblocks, whatever. And one more thing, I appreciate you letting me speak, Pete, is you're losing people. I've been doing this for 8 years. I don't want to come back to another meeting again. I can think of 5 people that have been involved in this for 8 years. They don't want to come back to meetings anymore. And you're repelling people. You haven't brought people to meetings. Look at these, all these chairs are empty. That's what you guys should be focusing on. Thank you.
lots of the critical thinkings are needed, but where you put your energy and time is very important. I have mentioned that from the beginning when you started having meeting, that lots of you were picked because of your background, because of your expertise, are not in this particular field. Only very few of you have the experience and the critical thinking on this type of issue in depth. So it's very hard for just very few of you to convince others to see the bigger picture. This has been the reason why I emphasize many times. Most of the members this time, most of the commissioners were picked for the failure of the commission. If you want to look at all the detailed things you talk about today, by looking at those things itself, not wrong. But it's really important to talk about it when the bigger picture, the real structure, you guys need to open up the door for the community open yet. You're supposed to open that door. If it's not open, the independency of the commission right now is in danger because look at the process you guys have gone through to get an independent lawyers for the commission. Look at all the record requests. You guys can be ball rolling. Only very few of you can see the bigger picture. That's why even you are all sincere. You guys all want to do a good job, but other people may consider you a joke because they know you don't know the ins and outs. You know certain things, but not enough to understand the few commissioners sometimes telling you certain things you don't think that's important, but that doesn't mean that's not important. On the other hand, if you keep on holding your own beliefs, your own ideologies, not listening to your fellow commissioners, you guys will fail together, unfortunately.
Okay, we're bumping up on
Thank you.
the extended time. Is there another comment from the community? Okay. With that, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you for those of you who came and to Commander Carney and your colleagues. Appreciate it.
Thank you.